Welcome back to the final episode of ChemCon TV at ChemCon Europe 2025, with today, on Risky Friday, an interview on risk assessment, a statement about Ukraine REACH, and spooky stories from our local reporter Filippo. But first, some sound bites from our Thursday sessions.
So this morning we heard from the authorities about their views of how to regulate and support the chemical industry sector for Europe. So we've heard that the Commission understands that the chemical industry is the industry of industries, but it's struggling with a number of competitiveness drivers, with high energy cost, weak demand, trade pressure. And the Commission is determined to do its best to support the industry with the Chemical Industry Action Plan. We heard the Critical Chemicals Alliance was being launched, and it's meant to be a partnership of the industry and member state authorities and European authorities to try to do the right things to help the industry stay in Europe, but also address the dependencies on other regions. We heard about the REACH revision. We heard from DG Environment, the Commission, that it would be a wise revision of REACH that they have in mind. And for me, the thing that really stood out this morning was the focus on enforcement, the need for a level playing field. And then from the Netherlands, it was really interesting to see a member state perspective with a lot of thinking into what new could be done. What are the incentives? Safe and Sustainable by Design Center. That's a very good idea, supporting with funding, with easier testing. We heard about testing strategies. We heard again about enforcement from the member states, and maybe member states helping each other in enforcing at the borders in particular. So making sure that the products coming into Europe are the same safety standards as products we manufacture in Europe. So a lot of support, new ideas that I personally find very enriching at a time that is very difficult for the chemical industry from an economic perspective. So high hopes, but besides policy and promises, what we need now is to see profitability improvement to enable the transition to better products.
Our morning session was about stakeholder views on the EU regulatory roadmap. We heard opinions from CEFIC as an industry association, from an NGO, and from a downstream user industry. A recurring theme was the fact that we need a lot of innovation and business opportunities to make this work. We also discussed at length the fact that pressure is on industry based on products coming into the EU from the outside, which are produced under less regulated conditions. And finally, we highlighted the enormous efforts involved in identifying and justifying alternatives when substances need to be replaced.
Let's check in with Filippo to see what he has in store for Risky Friday. So Filippo, what did you make out of the cat and pumpkin?
Halloween hints, I guess. That reminds me of Cadario, a beautiful palace on the Grand Canal. It was commissioned in the 15th century by Giovanni Dario. Cadario is infamous for its cursed reputation. Over the centuries, many owners have faced bankruptcy, accidents, or mysterious death, earning it the nickname the house that kills. On its facade, a Latin inscription reads, Urbis Genio Johannes Darius. But some say it's an anagram meaning for Sub ruina insidiosa genero. I will bring those under this roof into insidious ruins, fueling legends of a curse.
Venice is full of spooky stories. Are there more?
Of course. Many places we visited this week are full of spooky tales, but with me, you're always safe. Molino Stucchi, your industrial giant, Mr. Giovanni Stucchi, was murdered by a former employee who stabbed him in the stairwell within the walls of its own factory. Rialto Bridge. During its construction, mysterious collapses led architect Antonio to strike a deal with the devil, who claimed the souls of Antonio's wife and unborn child. From that day on, whoever passed over or under the bridge heard a baby crying and sneezing. Until A gondolier, yes, again a gondolier, answered, bless you, to the sneeze of the newborn baby. Dottor della Peste mask. During the plague in Venice, doctors wore this here with Dottore della Peste mask, white with a long beak stuffed with herbs to ward off evil. Locals whispered that the mask trapped the souls of the dying, and on foggy nights, its ghostly silhouette still haunts the alleys, searching for lost souls to claim. If you hear those footsteps and see a pale peak in the mist, beware, the plague doctor may be nearby.
Thanks, Filippo. And here it is, your final glass gadget. It might be a bit dangerous, much like the hazards and risks of Venice you've been sharing with us. That theme, by the way, ties in perfectly with today's interview on risk assessment, where I spoke with Henrik Lawson and Nicholas Ball. Do you see opportunities to better alignment between regulatory expectations and industrial capabilities to manage chemical risks for society?
I think what's really important, two elements to this is, and also firstly, I would apologize for using ethanol because fundamentally it does represent a very attainable example to illustrate a point. There are many more chemicals that we would argue could benefit from a more nuanced approach. But that said, it is about this discussion and this collaboration that's important. And I'm happy to see that actually, certainly earlier in ChemCon, there are more opportunities for us to engage, and we're not seen as the criminals that must be policed. We're rather seen a little bit more closely as a collaborating partner. Obviously, everyone wants to still have an industry. It's important that we effectively manage it. But that said, I've had a presentation earlier where, we also don't want roads that lack speed limits and enforcement. We need to be constrained. We want other companies to be constrained in the same way we are, I think is perhaps a fair way of putting it, right? It's not us, it's them. But again, I think these two elements is first off making sure that we do have these opportunities for discussion. We're not trying to cheat or bend the science in our will, but we are trying to make sure that the multi-million-dollar investments that we make aren't for naught when something gets restricted or banned in a way that doesn't really make sense to us, right? Obviously, we need to be convinced, you need to be convinced. The second is, honestly, I've heard several times, even this morning, about how important the chemical industry is. You rarely hear that outside in the public domain. If you would ask a person on the street, do you like chemicals? They're very dangerous. Why? Because that's all they hear. They don't hear about the success stories. They don't hear about how critical it is to life and existence in the world, not just the EU. Because it's too easy to tell them about all of the things that you're doing to ban or to restrict or to get rid of, or another substance has been found of this, another you don't talk about all the benefits and things come. And so what I would love is if there was a way to partner to, to continue to remind people how important the industry is, in a bit more positive way. And I don't mean like sugarcoat everything and say it's all fine, don't worry, you're perfectly safe, because we recognize that there's improvements that need to happen. But it makes it a little bit more easier for us to operate when we're not seen as the bad guy and the villain, because we're the only industry. There isn't another one to back us up who can be replacing us. Well, there is, but it's somewhere else. But my point is that we are the industry, and if we want to be safer, sustainable, improving, we need to foster that relationship and not be criticized too heavily.
First, I would like to come back to Nick's last point. In fact, if you look into any communication that we have issued, most lately the Chemical Industry Action Plan, a very important entry part of that communication is always to explain how important the chemical industry is for the European economy. We don't concern us so much about the whole global economy, but for European perspective, the chemical industry is absolutely essential for many good reasons. So we're trying the best we can always to communicate the essence of that, and we also see again a very strong need for that industry to be very strongly based in Europe, because we still believe that is the best way of ensuring growth and jobs, but also an interest in developing safe and sustainable by design chemicals. For that you need a strong industrial base even. I can see the public perception issue. I think that is probably very difficult to go against. But I think what we discussed about transparency and so on are the measures that we have at hand that can help us to mitigate it. But I think there are certain things which just are difficult in the public narrative to deal with. As I explained also earlier in our discussion, we are very interested in discussing with sort of everyone, all stakeholders, including industry, particularly industry, the regulatory roadmap, so that industry is better informed earlier in the process about what is coming up. So also they can take the necessary business decisions, can start necessary investigations and so on. So I think that's an area where we definitely would see more communication between regulators and stakeholders to the benefit, hopefully, of a more efficient regulatory system that can help us better prioritize, and also industry to have longer transition times if that is going to be the result.
Please watch the complete interview on our YouTube channel. After this interview, time to connect with our local reporter. Filippo, can you tell us here in your final episode about the Venetian lions we have been spotting all over the city?
Absolutely. The Venetian lion, or Lion of St. Mark, is the proud symbol of the city of Venice. It's typically shown with wings and a paw resting on a book, inscribed with the Latin phrase Pax tibi Marce Evangelista meus. Peace be upon you, Mark, my evangelist. This lion is also at the heart of the Venetian flag, a striking crimson banner with 6 fluttering tails. The lion, sometimes holding a sword, embodies both peace and strength. You'll find lions everywhere in Venice, on a banner at the Rialto Market, at the Arsenale, Venice historic naval shipyard, where several marble lions guard the entrance, symbols of the city's maritime strength. Lions are everywhere. It's estimated that in Venice you can find more than 1,000 lions represented everywhere, from churches, buildings, statues, fountains, even on doorknobs. From Venice, this was Filippo for ChemCom TV.
Filippo, grazie. Thank you for your fantastic stories this week. There's certainly a lot of lions in Venice, but not quite as many as in Lviv, the city of lions in the Ukraine, which is said to have over 4,500 lion statues and images scattered across the city. And that brings me to today's statement, this time with Fredrik Johansson of Reach Law, who will provide us an update on Ukraine Reach. Fredrik, welcome. Tell us everything about Ukraine Reach.
Thank you, Chad. Good to be, by the way, in Venice. But turning back to Ukraine, indeed, it is a chemical regulation that is meant to be harmonized with the EU legal framework because they want to join the EU for obvious reasons. And it's already entered into force. And now it's up to the industry to start complying, starting with pre-registration and later with the registration phase. So last week, we learned that the pre-registration deadlines will be postponed slightly with 1 more year, so the industry has a bit more time to comply, as well as the actual registration deadlines. They will also be postponed with a couple of more years. So now, industry has the time needed to comply with this regulation, because earlier it was a bit tight, to be honest.
And your statement is?
Start on time to be prepared for Ukraine Reach.
Thank you, Fredrik. Before going to the forecast, it's time for our final dish of the day. On Risky Friday, chef serves creamy pumpkin and cumin risotto with dragon blood reduction.
This is a pumpkin risotto with cumin and blood reduction. It's a typical dish from Mantova, Lombardy. Enjoy!
More about dragons at ChemCon Asia 2026. Today, our focus is on risk assessment and PFAS restrictions. We will explore their impact and challenges. For our final session this week, we'll take a broader view beyond the EU and look at regulatory frameworks in neighboring countries, like the United Kingdom, Turkey, Switzerland and Ukraine. Thank you once again for joining us. It has been a privilege to share the latest updates with you this week. We hope you enjoyed it and look forward to seeing you at ChemCon Asia 2026 in Singapore.